Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to April's Alumni's Cooking Class. My name is Viridiana Gonzalez. You can call me Viri. And I am the graduate teaching assistant for the Kendall Reagan Nutrition Center. And I'm a first year graduate student here at CSU.
I'm Christine Murphy. I'm a first year graduate student here in the Food Science and Human Nutrition program at CSU.
Hi there, my name is Alexis Denta. I'm a second year graduate student in the same department as well.
And lastly, I'm Natalie Mendez. I am also a first year master's student here in the department.
Awesome. And we're going to be leading you to tonight's recipes, which you all should have received a packet via email sometime on Friday or sometime this week. Today, we're going to be cooking Italian couscous, vegetarian lentil meatballs, eggplant pecan crusted parmesan with the homemade marinara sauce recipe. And lastly, for dessert, we're going to be making tiramisu. Each of us is going to be demoing different parts of the recipes. You all should have gotten all the ingredients that you needed. But for the sake of just preparation, a lot of our stuff's already pre-measured, but we'll go ahead and give you some time to catch up throughout the time throughout the class, so that way we're all in the same steps. There are going to be some overlaps within some recipes, so as we're doing one of us will come and jump in and start the other, and vice versa. Please just make sure to set the ovens based on what's directed in your instructions within your packet. Our ovens have been set up already, but go ahead and do that now if you haven't done so already. And first and foremost today, because tiramisu does take the longest to be ready because you have to refrigerate it for about 1 to 3 hours, today we're going to start with Natalie.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So like Miri just said, the tiramisu is actually like the recipe that's going to take you the least to prepare, but it's going to be the one that has to stay in the fridge for 2 hours for this occasion. So tiramisu, it is a authentic like Italian dessert. We will be using some regular coffee, but you can use some espresso. So we'll be using that. We'll also be using cocoa powder, but till the end, after we take out the tiramisu from the fridge, just to dust on top. I have the heavy whipping cream here, sugar, regular sugar, the vanilla, and most importantly, the lady fingers, which you can buy or make from scratch. And we have also tried that with some Angel Food sponge cake, and it works perfectly fine as well. So ladyfinger, sponge cake, whatever it is. Alrighty, and so we will get started. Like I said, this is the easiest recipe, no bake, just a long time in the refrigerator. So let's start off with the number one, right? Mix and stir. So the 1 teaspoon of coffee into half a cup of room temperature water. I have pre-measured my half a cup, so I have it here. And I have also pre-measured the 1 teaspoon of coffee. So I'm going to pour this in here. Okay. And, just mix it well so you can put to the side so that it can dissolve. So it also has time to dissolve. Alrighty, so that's good enough. So we'll just put it to the side after you have made the coffee. Now we can start with whipping the whipping cream. Okay. All right. So this heavy whipping cream was in the fridge until a couple seconds ago because we want it to be cold, and we are going to need half a cup of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure it, and I'm gonna use this bowl as the mixing bowl and to whisk here. Okay, so I'm doing half a cup only, pouring this here. You guys will see that it's not much, but that's because we're only doing like a few lady fingers. So have this here. Okay, next thing is your sugar. So the sugar calls for 1 tablespoon, which I have pre-measured here, and it's just regular white granulated sugar. So I'm gonna pour that into the bowl where I have poured the heavy whipping cream. Okay, and lastly, for the whipping cream, we're gonna use some vanilla. So I have a pure vanilla extract here, and it calls for 1/4 of a teaspoon. And we will just use that. Okay. All right, we don't want to pour too much just because it will be a very strong taste of vanilla. Alrighty, and so now I have my 3 ingredients here. It's the whipping cream, the sugar, and the vanilla extract. And now we can whisk. Usually with some whisk, if you have like where you have the low speed to high speed, that's preferable. But it seems like this one doesn't, so let's see how it goes. I don't want to make a mess, so let's see. Probably do it over here. Oh, it does. Okay, it does do the speeds. Okay, so I have it on low speed right now. I'm gonna go slowly up, and we will be whisking this for 2 to 3 minutes until some stiff peaks have formed. We don't want to overbeat, so really, once you feel like it's ready, stop and make sure and see if those peaks do form. And with that, like with overbeating, we don't also want to underbeat. So it's just really taking into consideration the time that the recipe calls for. Seems like we're getting there already. While this is finishing to beat, I did want to mention that you might have seen some recipes online that call for raw egg. Our recipe does not call for that. That's like really like the traditional tiramisu recipe, which calls for that, and also like a cream cheese based layering of this. But this is like the easiest recipe, which tastes so delicious. That requires no eggs and no cream cheese whipping cream. Okay, I think it's close to okay, I think it's might need a little bit more. Let me do it really quick. And I say that I need a little bit more because when I lifted it up, it didn't form that peak. It kind of still wasn't forming very well. It seems like it's done, but it might need a little more. Okay. Okay, yeah. So it's forming some peaks. I don't think you can see from over there, but basically, you should lift up the whisk things, and these peaks should come up. So okay, so it's ready. All right, I should just leave this here. Thank you. Okay, so now that we have this ready, it next calls for to pour the espresso into a bowl and dip the lady fingers in there. So, I mean, you can really, when I made this at home, I used the cup, but it probably is best to use a bowl. So let me get one really quick. This one. Okay, so I'm gonna pour my coffee, give it a mix again to make sure that the coffee is really dissolved. Okay. I believe they say to just pour into a bowl for more space because you will have to be really gentle with the lady fingers. These absorb the coffee really quick. So a tip is to dip quickly and don't oversoak. So, okay, before that, sorry about that. We will be using this container to make our tiramisu recipe. You could use, in reality, any, like for instance, I don't have it here, but something that, a little bit bigger than this one, like a rounded one. It doesn't have to be squared. I don't know. Yeah, in reality, you can use any bowls. So, okay. So now we're gonna dip quickly, like I said, and hopefully y'all can see this. but we're gonna do a layer of lady fingers, then a layer of the whipped cream, a layer of the lady fingers, and then that's it. Oh, and the whipped cream, and then yeah, that's it. All right, so you dip quickly, and it will obviously, like as you can tell, it will soak up the coffee really fast. So you do that, just completely dip, take out, and start making like a layer of the lady fingers. My container, due to its size, calls for like a row of 5, and then I'm gonna do a row of 4, just because the recipe calls for 9 lady fingers. So just to be exact, that's what it'll look like. Okay, and so this is how the first layer looks. Hopefully y'all can see. There's still some sides. If there's like a little spot that has no coffee, I would recommend y'all not to like lift it up and try to dip it into the coffee, because it will fall apart. So just leave it like that, because it will do its sting. Okay, so now we're gonna do a layer of the whipping cream. So with any spoon, in reality, or a spatula or whatever, I'm just gonna grab some with the back side of the spoon, and I'm going to layer it. And I think also this is like due to like, your preference. Preferably, like, you don't want to see any lady fingers underneath this layer, but you can make this layer as thick as you want. And yeah, and I am going to spread evenly onto here. Okay. Right. Let's see. Okay, so I have my first layer of lady fingers, first layer whipping cream. So now I continue, and I'm going to do 4 more. Okay. Also, a quick tip that I wanted to mention was that when you over soak, aside from like the lady finger falling apart on the bowl of the coffee, it can also just make the whole, like, the plate where you're making it, like the layers collapse because of just so much liquid. So that's why it's best to just dip quickly and move on. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the other layer, the final layer of the tiramisu. I do the same thing, right? I grab the back of my spoon, and I'm just layering it on here, but you can use in reality anything. And this one, I'm gonna make a little bit of a thicker layer just because I have the excess whipping cream on here. But if you're like a person that doesn't really like whipping cream, then you would use a little bit less, or whatever you like to do with it. Okay, so I have used all the whipping cream that I had in the bowl. And what's nice about this clear container is that you can see the layering, so it looks really pretty. But that's pretty much it. Let's see. So now we are going to cover it with some like saran wrap, or just anything really. I could use like even like the top of the container to cover it. We want to cover it and place it in the fridge for 2 hours today, but in reality, you can even do it overnight. You can leave it overnight and get it tomorrow and prepare it tomorrow morning. We won't be doing the cocoa powder like I mentioned in the beginning until after we have taken it out, because it will kind of like dissolve. It will mix with the whipping cream, and that's what we don't want. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, it was a really easy recipe, but now it has to wait in there for 2 hours. Thank you so much. Right. So I'm going to just cover it here and put it in the fridge.
Perfect. So now we're going to move forward, and we're going to start our Italian couscous.
Thank you.
So if you want to go ahead and start getting those ingredients ready, we'll go ahead and start with that one here in just a few seconds. So just for reference, what you're gonna need to start the Italian couscous salad, I'm gonna go ahead and review all of the ingredients that you're just generally gonna need for this recipe. You're gonna need the pearl couscous, which we'll go ahead and do that later on tonight. That's not what we're gonna do right now. We're just gonna do steps 1 through 5. You're gonna need the cherry tomatoes or the heirloom tomatoes, whichever ones you decided to buy. You're gonna need the garlic, the thyme, the rosemary, olive oil, lemon, which we'll also use towards the end. Salt, same thing, we'll use towards the end. And then the feta cheese, if you decided to go ahead and purchase that to add to your final presentation of the recipe. So right here, what we're going to use here today here at the KRNC, we're going to go to use heirloom tomatoes instead of the cherry tomatoes. But again, cherry tomatoes work just as well. Then just make sure to wash all your veggies to make sure that you get all of that excess stir or anything that they might have caught at the grocery store. And then lastly, remember that you're going to need a baking sheet because this is where we're going to place our tomatoes once we get to step 5. Right. Initially, I do want to go ahead and start with just like a safe knife safe knife demonstration. I know, maybe some of you are already familiar with some of the techniques that I'm going to talk to you about today, but we do want to go ahead and emphasize knife safety and teach you maybe a few skills that you might have not been aware of that can go ahead and guarantee the safety of everybody in your household when it comes to using a knife. So if you've heard about the claw method, it's like the bear claw method that we teach here at the KRNC. So I'm going to start with my heirloom tomato. And this is just for the safe knife demonstration, and then I'll go ahead and start walking through the recipe. You want to go ahead and grab your tomato or lemon, whatever you might be cutting, and grab it and make like a claw effect. If you can't see that well through the screen, if you look up top, you can kind of see it through your screen if you just zoom in. So you're going to go ahead and claw it and just really force it down. When it comes to your knife, this is a chef's knife. Usually chef's knives is what you'll find in your house. It's going to be like the knife that's pretty much sometimes the biggest, and it has like a tip at the end. When it comes to grabbing it, you want to go ahead and grab your 4 fingers and wrap it around. Your thumb should be facing and should be firmly attached to the side of the knife. And if you look up top, if you're able to see it through your screen, you can see that my thumb is right over the edge of the handle, right almost at the front of where the blade starts towards the top. That's going to go ahead and guarantee you have a tight grip and it doesn't like slip from your hand. You want to tightly grip it around. You're going to grab your tomato. You're going to do your claw. You're going to claw it down. And as you're slicing down, you want to make like a border here. And you should be able to feel like that wall against your finger where your knife is going to be slicing down. Because if you don't do that claw effect, it's so easy to just chop your fingers down. But if you claw it, you create a wall and you kind of protect your fingers from getting sliced. So that's just a quick, safe knife demonstration, something you can use at home, teach your kids, or just, if you're already aware, you just needed a refresh on those tips. That's what we're here for. So first and foremost, just make sure to preheat your oven, that it's already being preheated for the 420 degrees that we need to roast our tomatoes. So to start, if you got the heirloom tomatoes, you're going to cut this, they're pretty big. Heirloom tomatoes are pretty big. You're going to cut those into about 3/4 size of pieces. And that just means like, depending on how big your tomatoes are, ours are pretty big. I'm probably going to cut it into like 1/8 or maybe do 1/8 and then cut it into halves. You just want them to be kind of like nicely diced. Doesn't have to be perfect. We just want it to be nicely chopped. So that way when we put them in the oven, they all cook evenly. So I'm just going to go around it and just chop. And then one thing I forgot to mention is you want to go ahead and grab a bowl so that as you're finishing chopping your tomatoes, you can just start throwing them in there. And that's where everything else is going to go in as well. And then if you're using cherry tomatoes, as instructed in the recipe, you can just cut those in half. You don't have to do this about 3/4 of a piece and cut them into 1/8 type of thing that I'm doing. because those are already small, so you don't have to get them into that small of a piece. Perfect. I'm gonna start with this one. And then just some quick facts about heirloom tomatoes. I know that I typically don't really cook with heirloom tomatoes. I'm more of like a aroma tomato type of person. It's like the tomato that you typically see more in the grocery store. The thing about heirloom tomatoes, though, is that they're considered to be a self-pollinating plant, which just it's because of the heirloom plants are also pollinated plants, pretty much, and that just means that it's just more like of the natural form or the original species of tomatoes, which makes them have like a stronger flavor and overall have like more smells. And when you cook them, you'll notice this as you start cooking them in the oven. It just smells so amazing. And when you mix it with the garlic and other things that we're gonna add, it makes it for a very tasty recipe. And then aside from this recipe, we're gonna be pretty much cooking it hot or eating it hot, but you can also use it and cook it ahead of time if you're having like a barbecue or something at the park. This is also a great recipe that can be served cold. Alrighty, so I'm done chopping all of my tomatoes. Just gonna rinse this off so I can start chopping my garlic. And something that I find very easy when it comes to garlic is I'm going to try to show this as best as I can. Sometimes when they have like the skin around it, it takes forever to peel it, right? So what I do is if you put it on your cutting board, you place your knife over it and you kind of like give it a quick slap down. It makes it easier to peel it off than having to be there and pretty much peeling it one by one. So just do that real quick. And then if you already have your garlic peeled, please start chopping it and then add it into your tomato mixture. Again, and this is just, we're only completing steps 1 through 5 of this recipe. The cooking of the couscous will go ahead and happen later on tonight, just to make sure that we have everything warm and evenly cooked by the time that we get to the next recipes. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be more than happy to answer those for you as well. So again, what I mean by chopping is like not necessarily minced garlic, but just finely chop it. And then just do a quick, oh, this one escaped. Quick chop over it. And then once you have it already, one thing about garlic is it can get a little sticky once you chop it so small, because it releases a lot of those natural juices. Just gonna add it to your tomatoes. And then to your tomatoes, you're going to add your olive oil. This is going to be your rosemary. We also want to go in and just chop that very small, just like one little sprig or what's the word? Like little branch of it. And then once you have that cut, add it as well. And then your thyme. Same thing, you're gonna use a sprig. I prefer to kind of like clean the, let me move this out of the way, clean the sprigs with like my knife, get it all on here. Give it like a quick chop and then add it to your bowl. Perfect. So once you add all of that, that is ready. You want to go ahead and take this out of your way. You no longer need this. You can use your hands. You can use a spoon, whatever you're comfortable with. In this case, I'm going to use my hands and mix everything until it's evenly coated. You want your olive oil, your garlic, your rosemary, everything to be distributed evenly amongst your tomatoes. Perfect. You're going to grab your baking sheet now. You're going to pour it over here. Kind of give it a good toss to make sure everything's distributed. This is what it should look like. You can see it. If I tilt it too much, it's going to spill. But if you're able to look up top, you can see it kind of how everything's evenly distributed. Once you're at this point, go ahead and put it in your oven for about 40 minutes. You're going to start going to smell a lot of these flavors coming together. It smells amazing. And once you start seeing that the tomatoes are very soft, you can kind of do like the same thing you do with the cake and do it like a poke test. Once you see that they're kind of like bubbling and like have bursted, that's how it's written in the recipe. Then that's how you know they're ready, and when I tested the recipe was 40 minutes. So set your timer for 40 minutes and then we'll go ahead and take those out. And you don't have to cover them, just put them in the oven. And now we're gonna go ahead and start with our lentil meatballs. So start gathering all of your ingredients for that. And Christine is gonna go ahead and lead us through that recipe.
While you're gathering your ingredients for this recipe, I'm going to talk a little bit about vegetarian cooking and proteins that we use with vegetarian cooking. So, little background information. When you're cooking with an animal protein, you can get all 9 of your essential amino acids from that protein. Our body uses amino acids to build our muscles, and we need that for our bodies. Now, oftentimes, vegetarian vegetable-based proteins don't contain all essential amino acids. So if you look at your tips and resources page, there's actually a list of different vegetarian proteins that you can pair together to make sure that you get what we call a complete protein. For tonight's meal, the lentils in the meatballs are going to be combined with the pecans that are in the eggplant parmesan, and that will make our complete protein for the night. I'll look over the ingredients as you're prepping it. I've already got mine pre-measured. So we have our 5 ounces of mushrooms, and mine are sliced. If yours are whole, you can go ahead and feel free to pulse it in your food processor like the recipe said, but if they're sliced, that's probably going to make them too small. So I'm just going to finish chopping them by hand. You have your Parmesan cheese. I use grated in this recipe because if you use shredded, it doesn't get distributed as much throughout the entire mixture, but your grated really mixes in finely. We have 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a pinch of cayenne pepper. If you are averse to heat, you can totally omit the cayenne pepper, and I will tell you that much doesn't make it a spicy meatball, but what it does is enhance the rest of the flavors that are in it. We have 1 onion, medium size,
We have a quick question if you don't mind.
Sure.
If someone's allergic to garlic, do you have any recommendations for substitutes?
Ooh, what a great question. Garlic is in the allium family, which means that there might be a problem with onions too. If you are allergic to garlic, I would just omit it. There's nothing else that matches its flavor profile, but you would be okay if you're not allergic to onion. Go ahead and add that onion in, and then you are still going to end up with a very yummy meatball. And part of that is because I'm going to talk a little bit about umami, and that'll help too. Umami is a word that gets thrown around a lot. People may or may not know what it means. You might pretend what it means because if others around you know what it means. But I'll go over it just in case you don't. So umami is a flavor profile that basically makes you go in your mouth. It is savory. It reminds you of meat. And so when you're doing vegetarian cooking, oftentimes you'll want to enhance umami flavors in there because you might be missing the flavor or the presence of animal protein in there. And so the two things that are going to give us umami in this dish are the mushrooms and that Parmesan cheese. And I'll hit all of those notes. Did I answer that question on the garlic well enough there? I hope so. If not, you can send it in the chat there. Use pepper?
Maybe.
Sure.
If they
Just
want
more
a little
seasoning.
A little extra seasoning, black pepper. If you like spice, you can add red pepper flakes or more cayenne. This is a very versatile recipe. So if you want to try it as is without the garlic and then see what other flavor profiles you want to add in, I think it would blend well with what you want to add. I almost forgot my lentils, the most important part. And so I've cooked up my lentils ahead of time. You don't want to be putting dried lentils in here, but here's my cooked lentils and 1 egg. We are going to start browning all of these vegetables. And so go ahead and put your pan on, start preheating it. And I would do a medium high. And some people like to wait on their olive oil until the pan is heated. I add my olive oil now, and then I watch for it to shimmer. Once the surface starts shimmering on that oil, then I know it's hot. And so we'll let this preheat. Go ahead and get your onion. And I chop off both ends. You'll hear some people talking about leaving that root end on, but I prefer not to do that because I don't like holding my knife horizontal. I like keeping it on the cutting board. So I cut that root end off, chop it right down the center, end to end. And then start cutting. I cut slices end to end again. And then turn your onion the other direction and slice again. And that's going to give you your diced onion. Do that with the other half, end to end. Turn it the other direction, create your dice. And check your pan, see if your oil's hot. Mine's almost there, not quite. So go ahead and do your garlic next. I'm a fan of the way that Barry did hers. It's how I do mine too. I chop the end off of the garlic, and then with the flat side of the blade, palm on it, push down, and it cracks that garlic clove open. And then I just slice it end to end. Turn it the other direction and do your slice again. You don't need to worry about these being exact or all uniform. When we're done sauteing these vegetables, we're going to put it in the food processor to make a cohesive mixture. And so we're not worried about it looking pretty and uniform, but we want to get it prepped. All right. My oil looks just about ready. Let me grab my spatula. We're going to add the onions first. Let that sizzle. Give it a good stir. And then I find sometimes the biggest mistake that people make as they're cooking the vegetable for this is they just keep stirring it. Keep moving it around. You actually don't want to do that. We're going to let it sit and come into contact with the heat and with the pan, and it's going to cook out the moisture in these vegetables. That's what we're trying to do. We're cooking out all the extra moisture so that our meatballs aren't soggy. And we also want a little brown on these vegetables. That brown means flavor, and that means good. And so we're going to cook these onions until they're translucent. Spread them out. I love making these meatballs with my kids because there's no animal meat product in there. And I don't like, if you have kids or grandkids, this is a great project to do with them because like my youngest, she's always putting things in her mouth. And so we can make this, and I'm not worried about her putting raw hamburger in her mouth. We are using an egg. If you're concerned about the raw egg, you can also use the egg in the carton and just measure out 1 egg worth. And that carton of egg is pasteurized. So you don't need to worry about any bacteria. That's totally safe to eat as is. But it's a great project to do with younger kids. As soon as the onion starts turning a little bit translucent, you want to add your garlic. We don't add the garlic in the beginning because it burns fast. So we want to have the longer cooking time for the onion and allow it to cook down before we add that garlic. While those are sauteing, let's go ahead and take care of the mushrooms. If you need to blitz yours in the food processor, go ahead. I'm going to chop mine down to size right here on the cutting board. I don't know about you guys, but my pan is beginning to smell really good. Those onions and garlic are releasing all those good flavors. And they're just about translucent in there. And I'm going to go ahead and add my mushrooms. Again, don't stir it too often. Let it sit in that heat, turn a little brown. We're building on that umami flavor. And if you want to get really technical, the browning is called the Maillard reaction. And it's what changes and transforms the flavor of your food. While that's finishing for me, I'm going to go ahead and start mixing together my breadcrumb mixture. So in your large mixing bowl, you want to grab your panko breadcrumbs, your Parmesan cheese, and all of your seasoning. You want to do this now, not all together with our vegetable mixture and our lentils, because it will clump together and you'll have pockets where the seasoning is concentrated in one area instead of spread throughout. So mix that together. almost there on our vegetable. As soon as this is done cooking down, remember, get all that moisture out or else your meatballs will be too loose. They won't hold their shape as they're cooking, or when you go to turn them over, they might fall apart on you. So get the moisture out, especially those mushrooms. All right, mine is looking good. It's smelling good. Those mushrooms have that nice meaty aroma coming off of them. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off my heat. And then I want to transfer this mixture right to the food processor bowl. Do be careful. The pan is hot, your food is hot. So take your time with this. To this, you want to add your lentils. And then we're going to pulse it in the food processor 3 to 4 times, or until it comes together as a cohesive mixture. All right, this is what the mixture looks like now. And you can look up above. And I will tell you, right now it doesn't look all that appetizing, but trust me. And because my lentils are a little bit cooler, my mixture isn't piping hot, like it just came off the stove. If yours all came off the stove together, the lentils, the vegetable and everything, it might be very, very hot. And when you add it to this mixture, it could melt your Parmesan cheese. So give it a couple of minutes to cool off. There's really no rush with it. I'm gonna add it. We're going to mix it together. All right, I've got it partially mixed, and at this point, I am going to add the egg. You don't want to add the egg to that very, very hot vegetable mixture because, again, it'll cook your egg, and that is not what you want. So I have my egg here. A lot of people like to crack it on the side of their bowl, but I will tell you that's a great way to get eggshell in your bowl. And so what I like to do is I crack it on a flat surface over the bowl, and I try not to do it straight into whatever it is I'm making in case I do get some eggshell in there. Then I like to be able to fish it out when it's in a small bowl. So we add it in and then mix it together thoroughly.
We have another question while you're stirring. If you could just confirm if the lentils are cooked or uncooked currently.
Cooked. So if I were to use dry lentils, they would not cook through in the oven, you need to cook them ahead of time for 20 to 30 minutes in plenty of water to cover. They do have canned lentils too that you can use if you don't like cooking your own lentils. I do not season them as I am cooking them. Like a lot of times on the package, it'll say to add salt while you're cooking. But in this mixture, we are seasoning it with plenty of salt. So just cook it in plain water. So these are cooked lentils. It should be 1 2/3 cup cooked lentils. All right, and we're almost done. Now, once it's together, you might be looking at your recipe going, gosh, I'm supposed to split this into 16 meatballs. How do I do that with just a big bowl of mixture? So I'm going to show you the way I like to do it. I'm going to bring it over here so you can see it up in the mirror. So I'll spread the mixture all the way out. Thank you, Barry. And then just like it's cutting a pie, I'll use my spoon and I'll divide it in half, turn it, and I'll cut in half again. And then one more time, each of those sections. Now I stop there. That's 8 sections, not 16, because if you try to go smaller than 8, it really doesn't work. It's too small. And so I'll use my spoon to scoop out that 1/8 portion. Roll it into a ball, and then I'll split that ball in half. And then roll it. Press it together. You want it to hold nicely. And then we'll place it on our cookie sheet. And do that with the remaining of the mixture. After we get all of these on the cookie sheet, we will use a pastry brush to put a little bit of oil on the top and around the sides. If you don't have a pastry brush and olive oil, but you have a spray cooking oil, you can feel free to use that. That oil on top helps this mixture to brown in the oven. If you're using an animal protein, the fats in that animal protein are what helped it to brown in the oven. So we need a little bit of help with our vegetarian protein. And the kids are really great at rolling meatballs like this. And it's an easy recipe to follow and put together. These still remain this color right now, that unappetizing kind of baby food color. But trust me again, once you get it in the oven and it browns, it'll start looking good. Some other complete protein combinations that are on that tips and resources page. A lot of times you can put nuts together with a whole grain. So your peanut butter on a whole wheat bread will be a good complete protein, or a whole grain bread, I should say. And legumes and rice go nicely together. A lot of cultures have beans and rice as part of their staple, and it gives them a really nice complete protein. All right, we're almost done, down to the last 3. And because there is egg in this mixture, I'm going to give my hands a quick wash, and then we'll put oil on the top of these. And just space them out nicely on that pan. All right. So this is my pastry brush. This one's made out of silicone. A lot of pastry brushes are made out of fibers or hair, but this one cleans up nicely. Again, if you don't have a pastry brush, if you have spray oil, go ahead and use that. And we're just going to put some over the top of each one, down around the sides. Then these are going to go in the oven for 30 minutes total, but we're going to flip them over halfway through. And so set your timer for 15 minutes. All right, and these go in the oven, and we'll check on them in 15 minutes.
All right. Hello, my friends. My name is Alexis Genta, and as you can tell from my last name, I'm part Italian. So I'm very excited to be joining you today to show you how to walk through and cook this eggplant parmesan recipe.
Really
Well-
quick, we have one question about the meatballs, if I could jump in. They're asking if you could add well-pulsed nuts to the meatballs themselves to complete the protein, or if that would mess with the texture of them too much.
So you can add them, but you would have to make sure that you have enough egg and panko breadcrumbs in there, because nuts don't absorb liquid. And so you could end up with a mixture that's too crumbly. And so if you're adding it in addition to the lentils, I would probably add more egg and breadcrumb. If you're trying to sub out nuts for your lentils, I don't think you could achieve that with a full substitution, but you could add some. Just make sure that you have enough egg and breadcrumb in there to make it a sticky mixture.
All right, we're back to the eggplant parmesan, and if you guys also have any questions during this, please let me know. So we're going to be going through the ingredients first, just to make sure you guys have them, and if you don't, can quickly run to the fridge or grab the ingredients, no worries. So we are going to be using an eggplant. This will be the star of our dish. We're also going to be using breadcrumbs, so you want about a half cup. we are going to be using 2 eggs. We're also going to be using pecans as well that we're going to pulverize. And lastly, we're going to be having salt, and then we're going to be having 1/3 cup of mozzarella cheese and Parmesan. But we're going to be having fun with these later, not right now. And last but not least, actually, I completely forgot, you're going to want some sort of cooking spray. You can also use butter or olive oil, just something that's not going to have flavor. So actually, we're going to start off with this, and we're going to take a glass container, and we're going to add our oil to cover the entire surface. So you can use a spray, you can use butter, whatever you have on hand. No worries, it doesn't have to be cooking spray. So I'm just going to give this a spray, and that's all. All right. Now, I personally think this is the toughest part. And Barry went over knife skills, so this is really going to put your knife skills to the test. But we're going to be cutting this eggplant, and we're going to be cutting it into circles that are about 1/4 of an inch, so pretty small. Eggplants are kind of hard to cut, so we're all in this together. We're all going to struggle together. We got this. So I'm just going to lie this down on my cutting board. And I'm going to be following exactly what Barry said. I'm going to be trying to use a claw. Then you want to take your knife. You want to pinch it. Try not to have your finger there. I know it's tempting, but the best way to hold it is just to kind of grip it like this. And we're just going to claw, and we're going to try to cut as consistently as possible. So the smaller your slices are, the quicker it's going to cook. And the bigger your slices are, the longer it's going to cook. So, but the key is really consistency. So I'm just going to take the bottom. I'm just going to toss it to the side. We're not going to use it. We're going to use the rest of the eggplant though. So really just take your time, no sweat. Again, we're all in this together. And while I'm cutting this, I'm going to give you a little fun fact about eggplant. So you guys may wonder why eggplant has its purple hue. There's actually a really interesting reason. So there's these chemicals in all vegetables called phytochemicals. And phytochemicals, they're actually in the plant to try to protect the plant from different things that can harm it, like bacteria or viruses, funguses. But they also actually give the plant its not flavor, its color. And so eggplant gets its purple hue from a phytochemical called anthocyanin. And anthocyanin actually not only benefits the eggplant and protects it from all that harmful stuff out there, but it also has health benefits for humans as well. So anthocyanin is known to be anti-inflammatory. And actually, whenever you look at fruits and vegetables, those colors come from phytochemicals, and different phytochemicals have different properties to them. So like for instance, carrots, they have carotenoids. That's really good for eye health. Tomatoes, they have lycopene, and that's really good. It has other health benefits as well. So that's why you may hear a lot of registered dietitians or nutritionists say, eat the rainbow. And it's because you're not only getting all sorts of good vitamins and nutrients, but you're also getting these phytochemicals as well. All right. So that fun fact took us through our eggplant. Hopefully you guys are getting close to the end. Again, just try your best. This is not the easiest thing to do by any means. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make that delicious mixture that we're going to be dipping our eggplant in. And so what you want to do is you want to grab your food processor right now, and you want to take that cup of pecans and toss it on in. We're going to be blending that for a little bit. If you have the option on your food processor or food puree, you want to do that. But you also want to be keeping an eye on the mixture as you're blending it. Because pecans they're a bit oily, I know in the directions it says get it to a powder consistency. That's going to be a little bit hard. So if you can get it to something, I don't know if you guys can see, that's like a little bit granular, that's what we're going for. If you keep them in the food processor for too long, going to turn to delicious pecan butter, which is great on its own, dipped in, if you dip apples in it, but that's not what we want. So just keep an eye on it, kind of pulse it a little bit. That can also help to kind of control the consistency that we're getting. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a moment. And while you guys are kind of pulsing that through, just know that the food processor is a really great way to not only make mixtures like we are, but you can also make nut butters if you just kind of keep that food processor going. So you can just throw peanuts in there, almonds, you can mix them up and make some really, really delicious nut butters. Then you can just put that in a can and you can throw it in your fridge. If you throw it in your fridge, that'll help prevent the oils in it from going rancid. You can also make flours as well, or nut milks if you kind of put your almonds in there. And you just kind of pulse it, you can kind of get those less oily nuts a bit fine. So you can kind of create almond flour and stuff like that. So lots of things you can do with nuts and food processors. All right, so hopefully you guys are done processing. If not, no worries, you can catch up with us soon. But I'm going to be taking our pulverized pecans and I'm going to be adding in the 1/2 cup of Italian seasoning. And we're just gonna give this a good mix. And also too, if you have some spices on hand that you really like maybe oregano, thyme, you want a little bit of extra garlic powder, onion powder, throw it on in. Recipes are not meant to be followed in their entirety. They're meant to be a base and then you do what you want and you have fun with it. So this is simply a guide. You don't have to follow it completely. Have fun with it. All right, I think we have this almost mixed. So now that I have that all mixed, the next thing that we're gonna do is we're going to crack our 2 eggs. So I'm just gonna go ahead, take this bowl and crack our first egg and hope that no shell gets into it. All right, very successful in the first one. I hope you guys were too. All right, I'm gonna do the second egg now. All right, success. I'm just gonna give my hands a quick wash since they have egg on them, and then I'll show you guys what to do next. All right, I'm back. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to beat the eggs. So you can use a whisk or you can also use a fork if you don't have a whisk on hand. So I just kind of take the bowl, I turn it towards the side. I don't know if you guys can really see it. And then I just kind of take my fork and I do like a little semicircle motion, kind of like lifting up the egg yolk as I do it. So you kind of got to take your time, just go slow, but you end up kind of getting that mixture emulsified. So for the future, now you know if you don't have a whisk, just use a fork. All good. It works too. Okay. All right. So now we're going to create a bit of an assembly line to make this eggplant parm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my eggplant here, then I'm going to put my egg in line first, then I'm going to put the breadcrumbs, and then finally we're going to have that glass container that we sprayed. So this will make everything very efficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my eggplant. I'm going to first dip it in the egg. Now you can use a fork and kind of hook it into your eggplant, or you can be like me, getting your hands dirty and just use your fingers, which is what I'm going to do. So you want to take your eggplant, you want to flip it on one side into your egg mixture and then flip it on the other. You want to get it pretty well coated, and then you want to take your eggplant and put it into your mixture. And again, really get it coated, because the more of the seasoning you get, the crispier it's going to be. It's going to taste really good. All right. And so we're just going to do this with all of our eggplant slices. And while we're doing this, I'm going to give you another fun fact about the history of eggplant parm. So you guys may think that eggplant came from Italy, and I totally thought the same thing too, until I looked up that it actually comes from India. So it had been cultivated in India for quite some time, and then it spread to the Middle East. And it wasn't until the 15th century that it was introduced to Italy. Now, if you guys have studied Italian history, then you know that this tale is as old as time. There is an argument about where specifically eggplant parm, the recipe, comes from in Italy. And of course, it's the division between the north and the south. So Parma, which is a city up north, they say that they made the recipe because the word Parmigiana actually not only stands for cheese, but it also means it's like a way of cooking with vegetables in a casserole. So they say it must be our recipe. On the other hand, the Sicilians say Parmigiana. There's a similar word in Sicilian that means the slats of curtains, which is kind of like eggplant parm. You know, you're kind of cutting it into circles and then you're adding cheese and all that stuff. So we don't really know where exactly it came from in Italy, but because I'm Sicilian, I'm going to say Sicily. But don't quote me on that because we don't really know for sure. But anyways, the recipe did end up showing for the first time ever in 1733 in a cookbook by Vincenzo Corrado. So here's a little fun fact for you. You want a glass plate that's going to be a little bit bigger than this one because you want to spread it out in one flat surface. I have a little one right here, so I'm just going to kind of continue to bread them, but I'm going to stack them, but I'm going to put them on a separate glass plate after. Just make sure that if you have a small glass plate that you're not stacking them, just grab another one. But for now, I'm just going to bread them, and then I'm going to move them onto another glass plate later. So I hope that was a little fun fact for you. If you ever make this in the future, there's a couple really yummy ways to have it. One way is the classic with pasta. So you can take that tomato sauce that you're about to make next with Barry, and you can add that onto your pasta sauce as well, and that's going to make a really delicious meal. Additionally, you can also just add like a salad to the side too. There's a lot of different options. All right, so I'm going to finish here because I have a pretty solid stack of eggplant. I'm going to go put this onto, I'm going to spread this onto another glass sheet, and then I'm going to pop this all in the oven, and you're going to be doing tomato sauce with Barry next. I'll see you guys soon.
While Barry's getting set up, it is time to turn our meatballs over. So I'm going to pull them out of the oven and we'll take a look and see what we have.
And then also, everyone, as soon as Christina's done flipping those meatballs, it is about time to take out our heirloom tomatoes, or at least check in on them to see how they're doing. I hope you all have been enjoying all these fun facts. I know I have. I've learned a couple things here and there, which have been very interesting. But here, I'll just go ahead and let Christine go ahead and show you how to flip those.
So if you can see, the mirror up above, it has a nice brown crust on it. This is very, very hot, so be careful as you're doing this. But you want to flip it over completely. You don't need to add any more oil because we've already added the oil before we put it in. I can smell the Parmesan. I can smell those mushrooms. The sauce that Viri is going to be showing you how to make is wonderful with these.
It's very easy to make too.
There we go. Back in the oven for the final 15 minutes.
Thank you, Christine. Alrighty, so while Christine was flipping those meatballs, lentil meatballs, I went ahead and took out our tomatoes. So if you look up above or down here, just kind of pull it back a little bit. This is kind of what it looks like. They still kind of have their structure for the most part. They're just obviously a little dehydrated, but that's how you want them to be. And they should smell amazing. For the time being, I'm just going to ask you to put these to the side. We're not going to yet use them. But we're going to go ahead and finish the couscous recipe once our couscous is cooked. So I'm just going to place this, put like something on the countertop and set them down. And be careful if you have kids around because this is very hot. Awesome. And before we get started with the tomato sauce, I'm going to go ahead and just get the couscous going. So if you want to go ahead and grab the stuff that you need for the couscous, you're going to need a pot. You're going to need your pearl couscous. And the 1 teaspoon of salt. So I did want to talk a little bit about just the different kinds of couscous because typically when you go to the store, Walmart, King Soopers, Target, you are, for the most part, going to find like 3 kinds of couscous, which is going to be the one that's very small, like very grain-like, more like could be almost look like a little bit like a thicker type of flour. You're going to find the pearl couscous, which is going to be the one we're going to be using today. It's going to be it's going to be bigger, and then you're also going to find like colored couscous, which is just going to be a little bit more colorful, more vibrant. Today we're just going to be using plain pearl couscous, so that way when it comes to the recipe, if you were to use, like if you accidentally bought the finer couscous, that's completely fine. It's just like when we look at the final result of it, it's going to look a little bit more like grainy versus this one's going to look a little bit more whole. So for the couscous, if you can see on your instructions, which now we're going to go ahead and focus on the last 3 steps. You can see that I listed to just go ahead and cook your couscous based on the instructions that are on your box, on your container. So that way it just kind of makes it a little simpler. And it should just give you a ratio of the couscous to the water. In this case, for this recipe, we're using 1.5 cups of couscous. And based on the container of the pearl couscous that I bought, it's going to be 2 cups of water. And you want to go ahead and start that at like a medium heat. Put the right one here. Just going to put the water in there. I'm going to use this other one because I think this will be difficult. Set it down. We're going to let that come to a boil a little bit. And then once you start seeing those bubbles form like that simmering boiling, then we're going to go ahead and add the couscous and the salt. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and also start the next recipe, which is going to be our homemade classic marinara sauce. So if you want to go ahead and start gathering those ingredients as well while we wait for the water for the couscous to start boiling, we're going to start working on those at the same time. Alrighty. Push this down. And then I'm going to go over the ingredients that you're going to need for your homemade marinara sauce. You're going to need a can of the San Marzano style tomatoes. We're going to need garlic. It's a big thing tonight. We're going to need a little bit of crushed pepper, salt, olive oil, oregano, and then basil at the end. Oops. And again, the oregano and the basil, as instructed in your recipe, that's more of a preference. Just adds a little bit more flavor, kind of going based on what Alexis was sharing with us. You know, these recipes are more of a, they're not specific blueprints. You can go ahead and play around with flavors. If there's something that you absolutely love in marinara sauce or flavors, please feel free to add it. These are just suggestions in terms of a guide for you to use tonight if that's what you have. Ready? So to start, I'm going to go ahead and just start opening the can of tomatoes. And if you don't have the San Marzano style tomatoes, that's totally fine. You can use any other kind. It's just the San Marzano tomatoes has been found to just have like the best flavor for this type of marinara sauce that we're going to be making today. And then be careful when taking the lid off because it can get sharp. Alrighty. So you're going to need a bowl. Just a small little bowl here. And we're going to want to go ahead and put our tomatoes in here. And the reason we want to do that is because we want to go ahead and crush the tomatoes to try to get them as dissolved from its whole component as much as we can. You can use, I'm using like a potato masher, bean masher, whatever you use this at home. Or another thing is if you have kiddos at home, you can always have them just do it with their hands. If it's something that you'd like to just do and have them do, it's a nice thing that it's very sensory. Perfect. So it doesn't need much, just like a quick few mashes here. I'm going to put these to the side. And then you're going to need another skillet type pot. You don't want it to be a huge pot. You don't want it to be a very flat skillet either, or a frying pan, because this is where we're going to be making our tomato sauce. Then I'm going to briefly check on our water for couscous. Still needs a little bit more. Awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and grab our garlic. And for this step, we are going to want to go ahead and mince it as small as we can. That's what mincing is. It's just another form of cutting garlic. It's not chopping. It's the next step that's getting smaller from the chopping step. We're going to use the same technique that we used earlier. Myself and Christine have showed you. Perfect. So remember, with the flat part of the knife, just get it a quick slap. Get that outer shell off. Nice leaves. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them on the chat. And if you, some of my pieces of garlic could count for like 2 or 3. So if you are experiencing that and you feel like you have the equivalent of what like a normal clove of garlic would be like, feel free to just stop and then use that. And for the person that asked about what's like another substitution that they can use instead of garlic, for this recipe, I guess garlic gives a lot of flavor to the marinara sauce, but it's not completely necessary. As I said already, like we're going to be using oregano, basil, crushed red pepper to give it a little bit more flavor. You can use other flavors as well to experiment. Like if you want to go ahead and use onion, you can saute some onions prior, and that's going to give your marinara sauce like a rich flavor as well. So it doesn't have to be garlic. You can use like parsley. I'm trying to think of other stuff that you can use for marinara sauce. And again, like if you like it a little bit more spicy, then feel free to add a little bit more crushed red pepper, paprika. And your kitchen should be smelling amazing by now because we have all these wonderful flavors going. I have the tomatoes right in front of me, and they just keep getting the smell of the thyme and the rosemary. So once you have your garlic finely minced, and we're going to go ahead and put it into our pan. But we're going to grab a little bit of our olive oil. And then we're just going to dab a little bit around it, just a little bit. Then put it to the side because we're going to use it later. I'm going to let that warm up a little bit, and then I'm going to check on the water for the couscous. So my water is simmering now, so it should be red. Yours should be too, unless you have like a lower heat. I have mine at around like a 4. Just we don't want it to like start boiling because it'll start evaporating the water that we need for the couscous to cook thoroughly. So now that it's at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add the couscous. And then I'm going to add the teaspoon of salt. Give it a quick dab there, and then I'm going to cover it. I'm going to turn up the heat just a tad bit. And you want it to cook anywhere between 8 to 10 minutes. That's what my container said, which should be pretty much the same across the board if you're doing the 1.5 cups of couscous to the 2 cups of water. So we're just going to let that there. I'm going to let that sit there. The one thing that I do want to make you aware of is as it starts boiling and as it starts cooking, it might boil over, so just keep an eye on that. If you start seeing that, just kind of lift up the lid and then let some of that aggregation type of settle down. Alrighty, just gonna have a spoon ready here just so I can go ahead and move it around. I wouldn't move it too much, kind of following what Christine said. Let it sit there, let it cook. The one thing that we just want to make sure to keep checking is that moisture, because as the moisture starts evaporating, starts incorporating into the couscous, then we do have the risk of it sticking on the bottom, and we don't want it to burn because it's so easy for the bottom to burn and the top to look okay. And then it might just lead to a very messy pan and cleanup later on. Okay. So I'm going back to my marinara sauce, just waiting for my oil to kind of warm up a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and add my garlic. And the one thing about this step is that as the oil starts to heat up, your garlic starts to cook, kind of roast a little bit. The one thing is we do not want it to brown. Why? Because once it starts to brown, the garlic and the tomato, once they kind of interact and combine, it's going to give you a little bit of a different flavor that we're not going for. Again, if it happens, it's totally okay. Just the flavor profile might be a little bit different than what the recipe is calling for. And then if it's not going fast enough, that's totally fine. Take your time. I'm just going to put up the heat a little bit on mine to make sure that we're getting the oil to the temperature that we want it for. Ready? While we wait for that, I want you to take your basil and just kind of go ahead and give it a chop. And I'm already starting to hear my garlic kind of sizzle here. So that's how I know that it's at the right temperature with the oil. And again, remember, we don't want it to brown. I know the instruction says kind of like the sizzling, the hearing of the sizzling might indicate that it might be getting to that step where it will start to brown. Just keep an eye on it. Right. So I'm going to give it maybe a few more seconds. And this is a quick, 4-ingredient marinara sauce that you can make at home. It's very simple. You can get it done in like 10 minutes. Again, like in this case, we're going to be using it with our eggplant parmesan and our lentil meatballs. But again, you can make it with spaghetti. You can make it with other things. And it's something that's just useful and handy to have. So now that I have it, I think it's in a good place. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's not yet brown, but I can definitely smell it. I can definitely hear it. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my tomato sauce or tomatoes that I crushed earlier. Add it to the pan. And you're going to hear like that sizzle. And I think Christine is just going to come right on to give us some instructions.
Okay. So our last 15 minutes is up on our meatballs. So let's pull them from the oven. They look great. They smell great. I'll plate them and then bring them over to the counter so you can see.
Put this here so you can see Christine's meatballs here. Alrighty, guys. So as you start stirring that tomato sauce, keep the heat at the same level where it was when we were cooking the garlic. And you might start hearing like those bubbling noises that are going to start to emerge. So now we're going to add the rest. Ooh, don't spoil your olive oil like I just did. You're going to add the rest of your olive oil and then just give it a mix.
All right, and the finished product on these meatballs. So you'll see that brown, crispy coating on there. That's that the Parmesan and the oil and everything coming together to give that Maillard reaction again. But hot and ready, and it goes great with Veery's tomato sauce.
So now we want to go ahead and add the chili pepper flakes, the oregano. And again, if you start hearing like those big bubbles, just turn down the heat a little bit. Just give it a stir. Make sure all of those things are mixed in there. And then lastly, just add the salt. And there's no specific order that you have to add sorry, see, I told you about the couscous. There's no specific order in which you have to add the salt, the pepper flakes, and the oregano. You can just, it's just the way that I decided to do it. And then lastly, the last thing that you're going to add is just going to add the basil at the top. The one thing is that you're not going to yet mix your basil until like maybe give it about 5 minutes. And then you can go ahead and mix it in there with everything else. And your couscous should about maybe start to simmer down with that water. And it should be maybe like 2-3 minutes more until it's ready. I'm gonna get a lid on our tomato sauce and let it simmer, let it cook, get all those flavors incorporated. And then I'm gonna let Alexis come back. And I'm just gonna stay here to the side to watch the couscous so it doesn't go all over the place. Okay. And for your tomato sauce, you want it to go ahead and boil, simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes. Since when we first started, it's been about maybe 5 minutes that we started seeing it more bubble. So give it about maybe another 10 minutes. Again, keep an eye on it. Again, these recipes are not specifically blueprints to everything, but they're more of a starting point. If you want to add anything else, some pepper, maybe more basil, more oregano, please feel free to do so and add some of those flavors that you like at home. Okay. Just going to keep looking at my couscous. It's almost ready. And then you're gonna want to get like a big bowl. I have a clear glass bowl. Doesn't have to be that, but if you have one, it'll just look prettier and neater. I'm grabbing my feta cheese from the refrigerator. And then if you're still catching up on any of the steps that we're doing, we'll give you some time here while we wait for the couscous and the marinara sauce to be ready. Ready. Awesome. And then I'm using the cutting board that I used earlier for the heirloom tomatoes. You don't have to, that's just the one that I have available here. Because now, I have it right here, let it go. It grew legs and walked away. Here it is. So again, for like our couscous, if you see on the recipes on the ingredients that you need, you'll see that the very last ingredient says you need basil. It's more of an option, not necessarily you have to include it on there. I just feel like it just adds a lot of color, it adds more flavor, and it just makes it a little prettier in my opinion. And then the other one that's definitely an option, I know not a lot of people like the taste of feta cheese. It's the feta cheese here. Since my couscous is almost ready, I'm just going to go ahead and start chopping the basil. You want to go ahead and chop it into small pieces so that way it incorporates into the couscous very nicely. And again, I already washed my basil. And my timer is going up. Let's turn that off. And I really like basil. I don't know about you all. I love the smell of it. I love how it tastes in food, specifically when it's combined with like anything that has tomato in it, I think just the flavors just pop. And then one thing that I know Alexis kind of gave us some information on earlier about eggplant and its color. She briefly talked about lycopene. And in this case, since a lot of the recipes that I'm guiding you through today are very tomato rich, tomatoes are very high in lycopene. It's kind of what gives them its color. And lycopene is an antioxidant. I feel like a lot of the times we hear a lot about this word antioxidant, and it could mean, at times it can get distorted in what it means. But pretty much antioxidants are all of those phytochemicals or things in our bodies that kind of help us fight all of those bad things that are caused by stress, by the flu, anything that kind of seems like it's attacking our body or creating an inflammation is what we like to call it. It kind of fights that reaction and helps us stay healthy. And lycopene is one of those things that helps us do that. And as Alexis talked to us a little bit more about the properties of the eggplant as well, that is also another antioxidant that allows us to fight off some of those bad invaders that affect our health. Okay, so I'm looking at my couscous. I feel like it needs a little bit more time, maybe like three more minutes. But I'm starting to see, I'm not sure if you can see it from the top. If you can see like those big pearls are starting to form, you can kind of see those air pockets, those bubbles starting to fight through and break the surface of the top of the couscous. That's kind of going to be a sign that's going to tell you it's almost ready. The one thing we do not want to do with couscous, because it's a very delicate grain, when it's hot, if you stir it, it's going to turn maybe very mushy. We don't want that to happen for this recipe. We want it to stay as whole as possible. So I'm just going to give it a quick, see if it's how it's looking from the bottom. Because remember, at the bottom, it might be starting to stick. So far, it's looking good, but it still has some water in there. Okay, I'm going to put this to the side. And then I'm going to test to see if this is hot. It's pretty cold by now. So I'm going to go ahead and add our tomatoes inside of our glass bowl. This is where everything's going to go in for Italian couscous salad. This here. It's like you think you have everything you need, and then you're in the moment and you need one more thing. You want to go ahead and put everything in there. And as you can see, the tomatoes are soft enough that they're going to mix well, but they're not super hard where it's going to give you like clumps. It's going to incorporate and mix well once the couscous is ready. So just give it a quick spin. Stir, not spin. Okay, gonna check on my couscous again. Okay, I think it's ready. Gonna take the lid off, turn off your stove. And then I'm gonna put it to the side. I'm gonna let it cool for maybe like 5 minutes. And then just gonna move it around on the sides. Just so that when I put it in there, it's not too hot. It should cool down very fast. Ready? Check on our marinara sauce. Give it a quick spin. It smells amazing. And it's pretty much finished by now, by this point. I can really smell that basil, and I said already, I'm a big fan of basil. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna let that couscous cool down here for a little bit. Now Alexis is gonna come up and gonna walk us through the next steps, where we're going to use the marinara sauce that we made for the next steps in our eggplant parmesan pecan.
All right, my friends, we're back with the eggplant parm. So by now you should have pulled it out of the oven. It's not going to be fully cooked because we're going to throw it back in there in a little bit. But for this part, I think the most fun part, we're going to need our cheeses. So our third of a cup of parm, third of a cup of mozzarella. If you have more and it happens to spill into your eggplant, that's fine. And then we're also going to have that delicious tomato sauce that you just made with Barry. So what we're going to do first is we're going to pour the tomato sauce onto the eggplant. Now, just a warning, you can control how crispy your eggplant is here. So if you don't care if it's that crispy, you just want a ton of tomato sauce, just pour that tomato sauce on top. You'll be good to go. But if you want a little bit more crispier, maybe go a little bit lighter with the tomato sauce. And I like to use a spatula to kind of get this tomato sauce nicely on top of the eggplant, but if you're having a good time, you want to make a little bit of a mess, you can also just splash it on top too. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour this on. You guys, it smells delicious. You guys just made yummy smelling tomato sauce here. All right. Just going to add a little bit more because I'm a big tomato sauce fan, but again, totally up to you. And then for the cheeses, I'm just going to start off taking my hands and just sprinkling the mozzarella all on top. And so you just kind of want to get it coated all over the top. And again, I recommend you use more cheese because you can never use enough cheese. All right. And then last but not least, we're going to put that Parmesan on top. So we have 2 delicious cheeses going on here. And then after this, we're just going to pop into the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. Just keep an eye on it. You can stick a fork into the eggplant just to feel the consistency and see if it's ready to take out, or if you just want to keep it in a little bit longer. All right, that was it. Pretty simple. I'm going to pop this into the oven, and then it should be good to go in 10 to 15 minutes.
Awesome, guys. So I'm back. We're just going to go ahead and finish off our couscous salad. Perfect. So I'm just going to give it kind of like, get it to unstick a little bit. That's the thing about couscous, like with the starches, it kind of like clumps. But it's okay because it's fully cooked, and the longer you let it cool, the less it'll get mushy. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add our couscous into our glass bowl where the tomatoes are at. Put it here. And just give it a stir it around. Make sure all of the couscous and tomatoes are combined. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add the basil that we chopped. At the top. Again, give it a quick toss. Make sure there's basil in every bite. It really adds to the color and just like the appearance of the recipe as well. And then lastly, I won't add it on here because I know not many people like feta cheese. But if you want to go ahead and add that on top, please go ahead and do so. I wouldn't mix it in there though, just kind of do it as a top layer. And then lastly, we're just going to go ahead and cut a lemon. You're just going to squeeze half of like the lemon juice in here, just like a little bit. This is a very juicy lemon, so I'm just going to do a light squeeze. And then again, give it a toss. Gonna add our feta cheese to the top. Feta cheese, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. I'm asking the ladies that are here with me if they're okay with the feta cheese. They all said yes, so we're gonna go. Awesome, guys. And that concludes the Italian couscous. Put it here next to the meatballs. And then now we're going to have Natalie come up to finish our tiramisu.
Alrighty, so I'm back. So now that that's ready, right, we are going to take our tiramisu from the fridge. And before I sprinkle on the cocoa powder, which is very, easy to take along, I did want to mention that if you, say you wanted to make some like tiramisu for the weekend for a weekend get together, you can actually store the tiramisu in the freezer as well. But obviously, again, without sprinkling the cocoa powder until you are going to serve it or use the day of, because then it will just not. It won't look as good as it tastes. But so this is our tiramisu, right? It seems like, yes, it's not, it looks a little bit like more solid, I guess you can say, because it has just been sitting in the fridge for so long. So the recipe calls for 1 to 2 teaspoons of the cocoa powder. And this one is, just regular cocoa powder. But obviously, like everything, like the seasonings, like the feta cheese, you can add as much as you want. And we have this, so what do you call this? A strainer, okay? A strainer that I am going to basically like evenly sprinkle the cocoa powder on top of our tiramisu. So hopefully you guys can see this. So I am going to use a teaspoon just because we did make a little bit. But so I'm going to drop it on here. And now I'm just going to kind of like tap like the strainer and move along so that my tiramisu is covered with the cocoa powder. And so, yeah, and so you're just going to be covering this before serving it to give it that good, just chocolate. The chocolate and the coffee make a good mixture. Okay. And so, I mean, that seems like, it's enough. But like I said, you can do another teaspoon and it'll still taste delicious. I'm just gonna put the big clumps in there back. But that's pretty much about it. They can't really tell from how close I am, but like as well as through the screen, how the layering came out. But it's pretty much ready. Yeah, you just cut it into the size that you like and eat as is. Anything else?
Thank you, Natalie. So we're just going to start displaying things here in the front. Perfect.
Thank you.
And now we're just going to go ahead. We're just waiting for that eggplant parmesan to be ready. Maybe another like 5 10 minutes. And again, as Alexis mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the time, a lot of how long it's going to take for that to be ready depends on how thick you cook your eggplant.
All right, so I just took out the eggplant just a little bit early because I wanted to show you guys what it looks like. And as you can see, it is a cheesy, saucy, delicious meal. So I would just keep the eggplant in a little bit longer. Just really test and see if it's kind of softened up and take it off when you can.
In case you can't. Oh, it's hot. Yeah.
Oh, be careful. I can tilt it. For
Yeah.
you guys,
Just
see if
because you
can.
can't really see it from up
Okay,
here.
now you can see it. So it looks really good. It smells delicious. So just take it out whenever you guys are ready, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.
We have a quick question about the marinara sauce.
Definitely.
If there are leftovers, how many days will it last in the refrigerator so you can reuse it?
Ooh.
Yeah, so for the marinara sauce, first of all, we want it to cool down. You want to get it to room temperature before you put it in the refrigerator. Because if you put it in there hot, it might spoil a lot faster. In terms of how long you want to keep it in there, I would say maybe like maximum about 5 days. Just because, again, it's not like our typical canned marinara sauce that you would typically purchase at the grocery store. It's not sealed in the same way. So I would say roughly about 5 days.
We have another question.
Okay.
Do you have to make any allowances or adjustments considering altitude for any of these dishes?
Not for any of these dishes. That's typically more for like when you're actually doing like a baked product that requires like leavening or breads. That's when you would do more of those adjustments. Alrighty. So without further ado, if there's not any other questions, we want to say thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure cooking alongside you all. On behalf of the Kendall Reagan Nutrition Center and all of us here tonight, I hope you enjoy your meals. Please give us any feedback you may have. We greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to hosting the next alumni virtual session with you all. Have a good night. Thank you.